You're listening to the Fusion Patrol Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fusion Patrol. I'm Eugene.
And I'm Ben.
And we're back after a brief little hiatus to talk to you about everybody's favorite show, the Starlost. Let's have a little cheer. And we are looking at what I understand to be a fan favorite of the series, the episode known as the Alien Oro, which this is going to be my first real opportunity on Fusion Patrol to talk a little bit about Mr. Walter Koenig, which we're well overdue for. So, initial reactions. What did you think of this episode?
Oh, I'm sorry. You asked me something?
Yes, I did. I asked you what you thought of this episode. Isn't that amazing, folks? If we could bottle this...
I'm sorry. I did it again.
If we could bottle this, it would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Cure for all forms of insomnia.
I am going to have to agree with you on that one. This episode wasn't just boring. It was...
It had nothing.
It had nothing. I spent an hour watching this show taking notes, and do you know what I got?
A blank page.
A blank page, yes. There was nothing at all.
Nothing substantial.
There was no conflict. There was no real problem. There was no... there was just no.
That was exactly what I'll give my final analysis when I get to the end of it, but essentially that's what I came up with when I watched it too. And it's really funny because I saw this episode when Starlost was being syndicated way back in the day when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Oh.
Yeah. And I remember when I'd heard about Walter Koenig. He's going to be in this episode, the Alien Oro. And I thought, this is nice.
Mr. Chekhov will be in the episode.
Right. And the funny thing is I was just, as I was preparing to watch it again, I was trying to think back to it. And I could only remember one thing, and that was the opening credit.
You mean where they said with Walter Koenig?
It's Walter Koenig's opening credit, where they show a little image of him from the episode.
Oh,
that
right.
was the only thing I remembered from it, and I kept thinking, how come I can't remember anything about this episode? Well, I watched it, and then I understood why.
And so popular, he made another appearance later on in the series as the Alien Oro again.
And from what I understand, I think I really don't remember that one either, but I know I watched it.
I haven't seen it yet, so
I saw it once, and the only thing that I remember is him coming back, and that's it.
So I'll give you a brief synopsis of the episode. Our insipid trio.
The insipid trio.
Whatever we call them. Anyway, the
losers.
The three idiots. They pass through this section of the arc that's got a big hole in it, which fortunately they have spacesuits, and then they see a woman which Garth falls madly in love with. And to be fair, she's a nice little piece of work from a totally prurient and visual point of view. But apart from that... and then there's like this alien guy, and it's Walter Koenig, and there's a little bit of talking back and forth, like, oh, you can help us. No, I must leave. And okay, but can you do that? And would you help? No, and I don't know. And then they leave, and Garth's all unhappy, and frankly, that's it. That's the whole flippin' episode.
That is it. Well, thank you for listening.
It's a real...
It's a snoozer.
I honestly cannot figure out what they were getting at. I mean, is it
They
supposed to be a
weren't getting at
morality play?
anything. I couldn't figure it out either. I'm still at something of a loss as what was the whole purpose of this episode. It served no purpose whatsoever. It didn't. Our Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and Tweedledrip had absolutely nothing to contribute to this episode. Even though the episode is called The Alien Oro, he is neither the protagonist nor is he the antagonist.
No, he's just there.
He's simply there, although his character does, every once in a while, does something that is deemed a little questionable, but is never followed up on. So we're left, Oro is nothing more than just one big cipher of a character.
Yeah. So let's take a look here at our characters, our intrepid, insipid, Drippo trio. Devon, wow, almost forgot his name. He basically sort of notices that Oro is taking stuff from the ship, and his position throughout the episode is, well, what if we need that? And Oro will hold things out to him and say, like, do you need a ficapular flange filter? And Devon will look at it like, well then, you don't need it, do you? And at one point, Devon gets a little mad about it, but then he decides, well, it's not worth getting mad about. I don't know what I'm doing. So that was really pretty much it. Oro is trying to repair his ship to get back to his world, Beta Reticula 3 or something. XR, that's it. And
which resides in, let's see, he's from the planet XR in the nebula Xenopha. A planet in a nebula.
Sounds a bit like a sneeze.
Well, that's Xenopha is. I have no idea how it's supposed to be spelled, but that's what they call it. I was kind of interested that.
A nebula is one of those things where you have a star in the middle, and then like these planetary things go around it. That's a nebula.
In Starlost science.
Yes.
I see.
Well, I mean, come on. Is it any worse than the science they had in Battlestar Galactica where they could not tell the difference between a star system, a galaxy, a constellation? They were constantly using...
Yeah, it was very interchangeable.
Interchangeable parts. And this is just... I tossed it aside and didn't... I remember him saying it was in a nebula now, but it could be in a nebula. You could have a star system in a nebula, I suppose.
Well, it's very possible, and I suppose it is possible that a planet could reside in there. I was just kind of interested at the fact that you would have a humanoid life form that could evolve in such a hostile environment.
Maybe that explains his personality. Oh, I'm sorry, he didn't have one.
He had none. I think he was channeling his inner Nimoy.
No, but he wasn't. All right,
but there were times where he did smile, yes.
Yes, he did smile occasionally, and he was obviously a bit jealous.
Very weird. Yeah, and there were very weird moments, yeah. But for the most part, he was very detached. Yes.
Okay, well, I want to bring... I want to come back to Mr. Koenig's acting later. So we'll save Oro for last. So, Garth... so Devon does nothing. Now he is completely... sidelined in this episode. Rachel is mostly sidelined. She does a little bit of dialogue with the woman, Idana, and talks because Idana knows how to work electronics, electromagics and stuff. And so they have some discussions about, gosh, where I come from, women just stay at home and tend the baby and milk the cows and
churn the butter and sometimes work in the field and sew the clothes.
And, they have such enlightened women's lib things like, well, I guess it might not be so bad to stay at home and churn the butter if you're doing it for the right man. Oh, boy. Which is just an embarrassment, really. But,
pretty much.
Yeah. And the reason that we have these... And that's it for Rachel, except she gets trapped in Oro's spaceship once and freaks out. She's not dying of lack of air or anything.
No, she's just scared.
She's just scared. Ah! Well, that's what she gets for walking on board somebody's spaceship.
Yeah.
And of course, at that point, Oro did it on purpose and locked her in there because she saw that little smiley bit, and then later on he said, "Yeah, but he took care of her. It was nothing. He knew there was nothing happening to her.
No,
he just was teasing her."
What? Yeah. What was the purpose behind it, though? There was no follow-up on that.
Nope.
It just and that's another problem with this episode. There's a lot of these little things that are dropped in front of us, which they amount to nothing more than red herrings. Because there's no follow-up on any of these little breadcrumbs that we're getting.
Maybe this guy is evil after all. Ooh, wait, no.
No. Yeah, I kept thinking that. It's like, oh, wait, do I detect an ulterior motive? No, nope. I'm wrong again.
No, he's not wrong. And then he's like, he wants the girl to go with him, and he's clearly got a little bit of a thing going for her. Okay, it's a long flight, small spaceship. I can see this, assuming that they're biologically compatible beings from different worlds, which seems unlikely. But then we find out she's going to die, and if she doesn't go with him, and so he's actually being a humanitarian, sort of, kind of. But of course, Garth falls in love with her, and she falls in love with Garth, even though she knows she'll die if she doesn't go. But she decides, a little time with Garth is better than living my life on another planet. Although, based on what we see, her length of life would have been measured in hours. So, I don't know. And Garth, of course, he's in love with her, and that's fine, because, whatever. I mean, he doesn't see too many women. And he was, betrothed to Drip, and, anything would be a trade-up from that.
Especially since she seems to respond to him.
Yeah, she really obviously likes him, and she's like an electronics expert. She's doing all this high-tech, highfalutin, high-tech soldering and welding, which I appreciate the fact that Garth comes along and says, I used to do... I was a blacksmith, Funk, and that's kind of my work. It's like, really? And in fact, he single-handedly rebuilds Oro's spaceship using his blacksmithing skills and handmade bolts.
Right.
Which I'm sure are just perfectly airtight.
Yeah.
So anyway, big dilemma for Garth. He finds out that she wants to stay with him. Woohoo! But then he finds out that she's going to die if she does. Boo-hoo. And so he decides, dun da da da, that I will be the self-sacrificing guy and force her to go. And that will be the right thing to do. So it's all very sad for him, but we don't care.
No, not really.
Not one bit. And which finally brings us around to
Oro,
who came out to see what was going on with the ship, said that they actually observed the catastrophe that befell the Ark, sent him, he crashed, because he's apparently a really lousy pilot.
A bad pilot.
And now he's been on the ship for months, just over a year, rebuilding his spacecraft so that when a window opens up on its way back to Xandar, XR, he in the nebula of Achoo, and he can go back because they'll send him a signal, and he's all kind of passive about that, but seems very important to him in a sort of unemotional, sort of
dispassionate
kind of way. Which, as we say, at times he shows little glimmers of jealousy and maliciousness, and I don't think we ever see, and a little bit of compassion, but basically nothing. So let's talk about Walter Koenig, because there really wouldn't be an episode here if I didn't get to pick on Walter Koenig. I first came across Mr. Koenig in a little show called Star Trek.
I think many of us did.
Yes, and he was playing Mr. Chekhov, and I will say that I I greatly appreciate his work on Star Trek as Mr. Chekhov, because he has done more for bad comical Russian accents. It's like, I can do a bad comical Russian accent, and people think, hey, that's a credible Mr. Chekhov. And that's good for me. Lousy for Russians. But he wasn't... I didn't think of him as a terrible actor in Star Trek. I just thought of him as sort of, he's a bit
he was
player.
he was bad with dialects and accents, but that was all.
And
he wasn't a bad actor, no.
That was until I saw him actually speak in his own voice.
Oh, then it gets weird.
That is so weird. The first time I saw him, I think, in his own voice, may have been in Babylon 5. And I saw him and I thought, has he had a stroke or something? Because nobody could deliver lines that strangely.
But I'd already, when I saw the episode of the Alien Oro, and I'm trying to think, I may have heard his real voice in a radio interview prior to that. So it may not have been that much of a surprise. However, when watching this episode, I've seen a lot of Babylon 5, and I've been to conventions where Walter has been a guest, and you've seen all sorts of interviews with him. So I know what his real voice sounds like. When I saw the Alien Oro just the other day, at times it felt like he was almost beginning to slide back. It had a little bit of that sing-song that he used to use when playing Chekhov, and at moments you thought you heard maybe a hint of that terrible accent, and then he'd snap out of it, and he would speak in his normal accent, or whatever you want to call it.
But his normal voice and his normal accent is 10 times worse acting than he ever did as Chekhov. I have never seen him do anything convincing. If it's something about his voice, but when he's using his voice, I am more convinced by a 7-year-old in a Christmas play at school. He is utterly as if he's reading it off something.
I didn't get that when watching him in Babylon 5. I did get that watching Alien Oro. It was, if he was trying to come off as an emotionally detached alien, it didn't feel like that. I kept getting the feeling he was reading cue cards the entire time.
I couldn't get it. I couldn't get was this supposed to be some experiment? And I don't mean his experiment, but I mean by the writers in trying a more advanced science fiction-y concept of giving us an alien who's really alien, doesn't think like us, because they failed at that. But at the same time, if he were a human character and I'd watch this, I would just say that is a poorly written human character.
Well, in this case, I would simply say this was a poorly written alien character.
But I could see how somebody might try to write an alien character and give them motivations that we can't understand, and therefore would behave in an illogical or an inexplicable fashion to the audience. And you could go, well, that's because I'm trying to write him as an alien who thinks different. But the whole process failed, because instead what we get is a story where nothing really happened. Mm-hmm. That was the result. It really doesn't matter what the writer may have thought he was trying to do. The episode is a failure. The writer thought these are like the greatest drugs I have ever tried.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of.
If the writer got a kick out of it, then fantastic for him. I thought the episode was a complete waste of time, not just mine, but probably everybody who worked on the show.
And then, like I said, you hear people, and I don't know, you hear people talk about the Alien Oro as being like some highlight of the series.
Come on, we know people who love the man from Atlantis. Let's be real. Some people just don't have taste.
It's true, but I this is just...
If there's anything that fans, and I use the word loosely, find redeeming in this episode, I think it's because Walter Koenig is in it.
That's the only thing I can think of.
That's the only thing I can see.
Chekhov's in it. Ooh, Chekhov's in it. That makes it great. It's like, because they were always kind of really apey about it when he was in Babylon 5, too. Like, it was a big deal. And I didn't really think he added anything to the show. I mean, the character was necessary, but I didn't think he brought the character to life very well. I think there was only one scene where I ever thought that he was vaguely menacing, and that was when he was explaining to Mr. Garibaldi what he'd done, or how he was.
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
he was menacing in that scene.
That was pretty dark. I agree. Sometimes sci-fi fans can really geek out on some really flimsy stuff, and
then they set up podcasts to talk about it.
I know. What kind of losers are they?
I tell you.
So,
well, I'm gonna cut that part out because that's gonna make it look so stupid.
Right. So, the only thing I can come up with is it's got to be Walter Koenig. I mean, the story may have... It didn't have any of the really overt scientific stupidity or character development stupidity. I mean, on such a grandiose scale like we've seen with past episodes.
True.
Mr. Manchester, for one.
It did manage to achieve... if it were an EKG, it would be a flat line.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
No highs, no lows.
No, it was a nothing episode, because there was no challenge to overcome.
What we frequently call a plot.
Basically, a plot. Because you have to get your, even in the most hardest of science fiction, there has to be some kind of a plot. Otherwise, you don't have a story. You have this shell with nothing in it, and that's all this was.
And I think that's darn close to all we have to say. I have nothing to say. I genuinely didn't have. I know you've got a sum up, so I'm
there are not just a sum up, but there are a couple of funny things that did make me smile. Oh. Early on, when our insipid trio have detected the depressurized area, and Devin is trying to ask the computer what's going on, and he's asking in a nice tone. Garth is yelling at the computer, and I love what the computer said: "Sound input is above acceptable levels. Please modulate your voice." In other words, pipe down. I again, and I think what made that so funny is the way the actor, if you want to call him that, who voices the computer, the way he said that, the way he responded to Garth. It was like the brightest moment in this entire episode.
Which is pretty early in the episode.
It's very early. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that the accident where Oro crashed into the ship, I had to watch this little bit like 3 or 4 times in order to write it down, but it took place 0320 Sidereal 3 April Earth Year AD 2790. Now, that's important, only because when Rachel hears that, she says, well, that was just last year. And the first thought that ran through my head is, how the hell do you know that? Do all the biospheres have the same kind of calendar system? I kind of not think so.
Well, I thought that
maybe she learned a few things.
I thought from the pilot that we had firmly established what the year was, and I mean that's.
Yeah, but do they know? I mean, do they actually understand that calendar measuring system?
Well, yeah, I would think so. I would think so, because if you figure that the domes are all Earth biospheres, I imagine that they probably have a simulated year of 365 days linked up. I mean, I can't imagine them setting up a dome and going, well, everyone is biologically geared up towards 24-hour days and 365-day years, but why don't we make our dome 17.5-hour days, 234 years? That'll be a laugh.
That's not what gets me, is how society had decayed. We've seen all sorts of examples of that in the various areas, sometimes not even biospheres, but just these different communities that have been presented to us in different episodes. And I just thought it was interesting that this universal, or at least what the computer deems as the universal form for measuring time, still exists in Cypress Corners after how many years? I mean, clearly there's been some sort of a cultural decay there.
Yeah, but
I found that interesting. And that brings me to what is my final little trivial point. Let's see. Where did I write it down?
It's so little.
Oh, yes, here it is. Garth is talking to Idana, and he makes mention of a quilt that his mother made for him with silver stars. But then he finishes up with, interesting, because she never saw stars in Cypress Corner, so how would she know what they looked like? And I thought, there's the potential there for something really important, and yet they're going to just drop it.
Yes, and
because even Garth says they never saw stars in Cypress Corners. And his mother would spend her entire life there.
Does not really keep with what I expected Cypress Corners to be like, because they had night and day, and they talked about the sun and somehow I just you kind of feel like there ought to be simulated stars up there.
You would have thought. I would have assumed that there were. But Garth throws out this line, we never had stars.
And on top of that, you're looking at the domes from the outside of the ship. They kind of appear translucent.
Right.
Huh.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And as for my final analysis on this, as I said, I thought...
You're going to start snoring again.
I almost did watching it. I honestly thought this was one of the most boring episodes ever. Oro is hardly any kind of an antagonist. And even though there were private moments where he did display some kind of mild emotion, as we had discussed earlier, to the rest of the arc, to the rest of our trio, he is totally unemotional, except when he talks about Idana and how important it is that he take her.
Well, and also how important it is for him to get home.
Right. Because of the way he's written, he's not even two-dimensional. I mean, we've seen villains in the past, and I use villains, but we've seen antagonists in past episodes that were pretty two-dimensional.
I mean, like that guy that thought that humans were all nasty and that we should program
basically,
them.
Yeah.
Simon Oakland, there we go.
Right. But Oro isn't even that. He lacks complete dimension.
These guys this episode, they're just like walking in front of sets.
Yeah. I mean, the real drama, if there's any, is between Garth and Idana. And her desire to stay, because she does express a desire to stay with Garth, versus Oro's desire to save her life.
And I did make mention of the fact that she was real pretty up front, because they don't speak to each other even enough in this episode to... I mean, it can't be anything other than pure, unadulterated lust at first sight. Because there isn't any time for them to develop any emotional attachment to each other.
No.
It's just pure bad TV love, if you will.
Oh. I'm not sure I would even call it that.
Well, you know how that goes in movies and whatnot. That two people get stranded on an island and they've both got husbands and wives, but they realize, wow, my life really sucked with this other person because I've got this guy now and he's like amazing and and you know, if you really think about it, it's like, really, you've just spent like a day on an island with somebody you don't know and you're lusting after them and you're going to spend the rest of your life happily ever after. Doesn't happen that way. You know, it's that movie fairy tale love that isn't really
right.
It's what's led to the divorce rate in this world, in this country, I think, is people thinking that's actually not as asinine stupid as it is.
They almost craft the interaction between Garth and Adana out of something like out of a made-for-lifetime TV movie or some Harlequin novel. It's trite, it's cliche.
He was a blacksmith from a backwards planet.
Right.
She was a woman who couldn't bear children but knew all about electronics but had never seen an adult man.
And it was doomed to fail.
Yes. Yes, it was.
I mean, what we ended up having here was Oro is totally uninteresting. And he needs, I mean, if he's your title character, he should be the most interesting character.
Well, he may have been the most interesting character. That's the sad part.
He might have been, but he's still, for what it is, he's still entirely uninteresting. Oro's uninteresting. Idana is uninteresting. I mean, you really don't care about her that much.
Don't really, no.
Our trio, they are totally uninteresting. So,
as usual.
I mean, yeah. But even more so, they're even duller and flatter
than usual,
than ever before in this episode. And I kept watching it because this is only the second time I've ever seen this episode, and so I kept watching it, hoping that something
would happen,
might actually happen to give maybe some of these characters a greater range of depth. But unfortunately, as with some of the other episodes, my hopes were utterly dashed.
I would have been happy in this episode if Devon or Garth would have had to subdue somebody with a towel, as they have previously. That would have been a much higher point of the story if they'd had something to do. But alas, no towels or trays of fruit were available for them to.
No.
All right, well, let's leave it at this. We've given this episode far more time than it was due. It's given far more credence, so if anybody's telling you, ooh, Starlost, there's an episode with Walter Koenig in it, tell them to get stuffed.
Well, no, actually, I want to hear if there is anybody out there that actually liked this episode. Yeah, they say, oh, I love the Alien Oro. Explain why.
Justify.
Well, I mean, I
in 140 characters or less.
Yeah, tweet. Yeah, please tweet it. Now, I really want to know. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't think I am, but I'd like to at least, I'd like to give someone an opportunity to prove me wrong in my analysis of this episode. I thought it was just totally devoid of anything substantial. But if there's anybody out there that really loves this episode and thinks of it as some kind of a classic, please make your case. Maybe I really did miss something, and I'd like to hear it.
Ben's being more open-minded than me. I don't think there was anything there to miss, but I'll.
Well, I don't think there is anything either. But I'm going to be magnanimous about this and give the benefit of the doubt to to anybody that loved it.
I'll listen to
still
any
maintain
evidence
that there
that's
isn't
provided to the contrary.
Yeah, I still maintain that there isn't anything there. But I'd like to hear why people do like this episode so much.
So
and have it be aside from, but it's got Walter Koenig. Yeah, and what's your point?
Yeah, that's not a positive. But
No, hardly.
So next time, I'm thinking... by the way, we're going to try to get back on a little more regular schedule here every couple weeks like we're supposed to be doing it. And hopefully we'll get back to it. And I think we will be doing an episode of UFO next time.
We haven't touched Doom Watch.
I know we haven't touched Doom Watch, but I'm getting back into the thing of it. I feel like shooting aliens rather than being depressed by
aliens.
rats or whatever we're going to get next on Doom Watch. So try to throw these things into stark relief, and that's what we'll be looking at. I hope you'll join us. I hope that if you tried watching the Alien Oro before you listened to this podcast, well, you probably didn't hear us because you were sound asleep. And if you're thinking of doing it afterwards, have a pillow or something. Don't be sitting in a position where you might fall forward and harm yourself. So, until next time, next time we do hope to see you again, so it's not until next time that we see you again. So, we hope to see you again next time on Fusion Patrol.
Cheers.
You've been listening to the Fusion Patrol Podcast, a production of Lone Locust Productions. Join us on our new discussion forums at fusionpatrol.com. Find us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Username Fusion Patrol. You can also send us feedback by email at feedback@fusionpatrol.com. If you'd like to support Fusion Patrol, please leave us a review on iTunes. Fusion Patrol's theme music is Fight the Future by Amberwolf.